Welcome to another episode of the Ignited Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Jessica, your host, and I invite you to join in and listen to a conversation with an amazing entrepreneur who has leaned into their passion and is igniting their life and the life of others. Welcome to another episode of Ignited Entrepreneurs. Today, I am very excited because I have with me the anti-hustle guy, Ashao FreeSky. Ashao, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be awesome and very selfishly interesting for me. So I'm really excited to hear all about the anti-hustle and how we can be more productive and yet still, save time, have time for ourselves. So, Asho, can you please tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I help mainly coaches, online coaches, and course creators become more productive. And really, the end goal is so that not just to do more and do more faster, but really so that we can work less and actually live more. And especially for us who are parents, especially those who have young kids, it's really about creating space so that we can enjoy our families while we're growing a business, and that it's not all about our business, but that our business is there to serve our life.
Ooh, I like what you said about creating space. That
Yeah,
that just
yeah.
feels good, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're not doing something for your business. It feels more like you're creating a way that you can do it all.
hmm
Oh, I like that. Tell me, so how did you come to be the anti-hustle guy? What was your journey? What did you do before?
Yeah, well, my journey really was rooted in my pain of being just very distracted, and I would procrastinate a lot. I was that guy that, I would stay up all night in college working on an assignment and handing it literally at the last minute. Like, the class starts at whatever 9 a.m. and I'm still working on it, and I'm like about to hand it in right as we're like cutoff time. Um, and I couldn't get myself to do the things that I knew I quote unquote should or that I wanted to do. And I thought I was a lazy person, like as if that was a character trait of mine that couldn't be changed. And I struggled with that for years. And then we had our first child, Ocean, and I was working. I would get up in the morning. It was still dark. I would leave for work, and before she woke up, before my wife and my daughter woke up, and I would get back home, and it was late, and I wouldn't see her. Like I would barely see her for maybe a few hours before she had to go to bed, and this is going on, for months, and I'm just feeling like I'm missing out on her childhood. And that is what really sparked me to want to do things differently. And I went on a journey of researching how can I do this differently. And another part of that was also that becoming a new parent, I suddenly had zero time to myself. Like you're taking care of this child that's just like, well, the whole routine changes, you can't sleep at night. And my wife had a cesarean, and so she was recovering from surgery. And so I had to take care of her as well. And, it's sad to say, but I started to feel a feeling of resentment towards my family because I just had no space for myself and I was getting lost. And obviously there was love there and amazement. But the reality was that I felt kind of claustrophobic within this family dynamic. And I knew something had to change. And, I picked up this book, and it was a book on fathering or something. I don't know. I just opened it to a random page, and I read one sentence, and it said, as a father, you need to get up early in the morning and have time to yourself. And that struck so true to me. I was like, I need to get up early in the morning and have time to myself. But you know, having struggled in my past with wanting to create, you know, I tried working out and giving up going to the gym. I tried working out with my buddy in his basement, and I gave up on that. And I believed I was a night owl, and I was like, how can I get up when I'm a night owl, right? Again, this fixed mindset about who I am. And so I started studying neuroscience and behavior change, and I I applied the things that I was learning, and progressively I started to develop a small but solid morning ritual. I started it with just a small 15 minutes, or I don't even know, maybe even 10 minutes when I first started. And it built up. I was consistent with it because I was applying the things I was learning. And I started having friends ask me, like, what are you doing? Like, how are you so disciplined? And that really struck me. I was like, disciplined? What do you mean? Like, are you pointing at me? Like, disciplined? I never would have thought of myself as someone who was disciplined. That was completely outside of my self-image. But I started to build a reputation in the community as like the go-to person for habits and behavior change. And I was like, okay, well, these people think I know something, so maybe I do. And I started putting on workshops and programs on goal setting and habit change. And I started to, get good feedback from people. And just naturally, it kind of being part of how I was now operating in the world, I brought that into my business as well. Applying the behavior change concepts and habits and systems. I love systems. I live by systems. I run my business off systems now. And, one day I noticed I had spent the full day undistracted and highly effective from the very beginning of the day until the end. And it wasn't even like an unusual day. That was actually how most of my days were now. It had become the norm, but that was so opposite of how I used to live. And suddenly it just like I saw the contrast of where I was, just like distracted, procrastinating, going down rabbit holes for hours at a time, to now just like being on task every minute of the day and having my full day like scheduled out, and yeah, just felt like I was making real progress. So that was like a big realization for me, but that wasn't the biggest change. Really, what ended up happening was that I didn't just change how others saw me, but I also fundamentally changed how I saw myself.
Mm. That's powerful, isn't it? When you see it for yourself finally.
Yeah, and I know of nothing more deeply satisfying than becoming who I have today, and the process of progressively expressing a truer version of myself. Like that's just such a satisfying experience.
Yeah, and one of the things I really love about your story was that you didn't start with like, a 75 hard kind of program. It was like you took small steps. I got up 10 minutes early, and that's where it started, and you just stacked from there. Right. And I think that's what scares a lot of people. It's like you got to do like a total 180 if you want to change something, but you don't. It starts with, like you say, just those small daily habits and changes.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the fundamental reasons why people fail. Like people will set New Year's resolutions, and then by mid-February, 80% of people have already given up on their New Year's resolution because they have this go big or go home mentality. And they think that they need to make a 180, like you said, a 180 shift. Okay, I'm going to run 5 kilometers every day, even though they've never ran a day in their life. And then, but they have this high level of motivation, but motivation waxes and wanes.
Yeah.
And you can't optimize your goals relying on motivation.
Another thing that I've also learned recently, and I want to give the credit to the amazing Ed Milet, because he's the one who taught me the keeping promises to yourself and how that adds to your self-esteem. But then what I started to think about is that if we make a promise to ourselves and we don't keep it, it actually does way more damage than if we'd never made that promise in the first place. And so again, back to the whole start small. Only do what you know you can actually do so that you don't actually take away from yourself in the process.
Mm. Yeah, and that was in my past the trap that I fell into was not wanting to make commitments I couldn't live up to, so I wouldn't make commitments at all to
Mm.
myself. And when I realized, oh, you can make a micro commitment and then it's
Ooh.
easy to stick to. And then you build self-esteem and you build momentum and then you make another slightly larger micro commitment. And then you build more momentum and more self-esteem. Oh, how come I never thought of that?
Yeah, micro commitment. I like that. Now that sounds like something that any of us could do at any time. Just going to make a little micro commitment. And it doesn't seem like it's just not scary. It doesn't have that oh, I can't do that or where am I going to find time for that or all those regular like yeah buts that come up. A micro commitment, I mean, that's easy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Okay, so back to kind of like how you started to make those changes. What do you think was the thing that started to help you shift and create over time those changes that turned into you now being so much more productive and having that space for everything that you want in your life?
I think, like we were just saying, micro commitments, just consistent changes in my behavior, and when it comes to business, my workflow, and implementing one habit at a time in my business. And when we get into time blocking, I'm going to address what those different components are. But I think it was really just adding one thing and then getting that down as a habit, and then adding another thing, and then getting that down as a habit, and and building up from there.
Yeah, I like that. And you can only focus on so much, right? So if you only say commit to one thing at a time, turning it into a habit and then building from there, I mean that's so it feels doable, like it doesn't feel like it's such a challenge. Not that a challenge is a bad thing, but when you're trying to create and make shifts, we don't want to be too challenged. We want to create something that starts out that we can build on. And I love the idea of just focus on one thing at a time.
Absolutely, I am a huge proponent of focus in micro levels and macro levels. So like when it comes to a macro level in your business, like what is your one major focus for the next 90 days? And then on a more micro scale, what is your one step for this next 90-minute block of work? And everything else can wait until that is completed. I like the analogy of the sun versus the laser. If you think of the sun, it emits billions of kilowatts of energy down onto the earth. But if you stand in the sun for too long, the worst that happens is you get a sunburn. But a laser channels just a few watts, not even kilowatts, and far from billions, just a few watts into one direction, and that's enough to cut through diamond. That's the power of
Mm.
focus.
Ooh, I like that. I've never heard that before. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And that's why I love time blocking so much, is because that is the framework within which I know that I can stay focused on this. And if distractions come up, I have a place. I'll talk about that in a little bit later, how I deal with distractions, but that I have a system in place for handling things that would normally pull me away into a different direction, and they will be addressed. I don't need to think about them now, so that I can stay focused and actually make progress in one direction without diffusing my energy into a dozen directions, and not making any true progress in any one of them.
Okay, so we need to talk about this time blocking thing because I really need to learn that system for not going down rabbit holes.
Yeah. Oh man. Tell me about it. That was my, spending 95% of my time in a rabbit hole.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, I find that too. And I give myself the excuse of, well, but I've been working really hard. I deserve some time to just be entertained. But that,
Mm.
few minutes turns into an hour and I'm just like, now I start to panic.
Hmm. And like there is a place for being entertained. And the thing is when you designate that time, then you can be fully engaged in the entertainment and not have guilt around you should be working. And when you're working, don't, or if you're, like working and you're thinking about the entertainment, you don't have to worry about, like, will I be entertained? You know that there's designated time for that entertainment or
Mm.
whatever it is in your life. If it's for health or if it's for relationships, when you have designated blocks for the things that matter to you or the things that you want to enjoy, you don't need to be worrying about it. You know that it's going to come up at this time and you can ease up about it.
Okay, I like that idea. It's like when the moment comes up or the craving comes up to allow yourself to be distracted, you can just remind yourself, yep, don't worry about it, that's coming. You can just wait like half an hour or 2 hours or whatever. We've built that into our schedule. We'll do that later. Is that kind of
Mm-hmm.
what you're talking about?
Exactly.
Oh, I
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And so that's on like the more micro level when you're within a block. And if you get distracted on something, um, I'll touch on this a little bit later, but basically I have what I call a distraction pad beside me where I just jot down anything that's going to distract me on that piece of paper. And I know that I'll address it at a future point.
Oh, wow, a distraction pad. That's kind of like my little sticky note pad that I have. So when I'm listening to things, I just write them down and I put them into my little pile, and those are things that I can focus on later.
Yeah. Similar to that.
Oh, I like that. Okay. You know what I also it's so I like systems. Like you are so speaking my language when you talk about systems and time blocking and all this stuff. Like I'm really into this. So so can you share more about like what your system is for time blocking? How does that work? Because I think I need to learn it.
Absolutely. So fundamentally, time blocking is really just scheduling in advance what activities you'll be doing and when. But more importantly, it's scheduling essential activities in advance to make sure that what has to get done actually does get done. So, there's like if you think of the the problem that we face is really distractions, but what the source of them is that there's a war for our attention. There's millions of things fighting for our attention. There's emails, texts, calls, meetings, and social media, which is specifically engineered to capture and capitalize on our attention, right? So we're fighting like science that is applied to capturing our attention. And then on top of that, there's information overload. There's all the things that you want to be learning or whatever news that's so readily available to us on the internet that if you're not very conscious and intentional about how you use your attention, it will be captured and it will be held until you realize that it's been captured and you're like, oh, whoa. All of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh, I've been down this rabbit hole. Right? And so all of these things distract us from our most important work. They distract us from making progress on the things that truly matter to us in our lives and in our businesses. So that's like external distractions, but then there's also internal distractions. So thoughts that come up that distract us and we're concerned about a different project than what we're working on right now and maybe like within our business we're thinking about, oh, what about this other thing that I should be working on? And if you don't have a system in place that that'll be addressed, then now you're scattering your mind and you can't focus. Again, you can't make that progress in one direction. So this really it leads to like overwhelm and stress and all the competing to-dos we have that we're juggling between work and home life, and it's exhausting.
Yes, just thinking about it can be exhausting.
And what most or a lot of entrepreneurs think to solve this is that they just need to get more done faster. But the problem with this is there's this obsession with hustle and grind and working more and more and longer, and that's that obsession and that belief that we need to just do more faster is it's literally killing people. In Japan, they have a term that they've coined karoshi, and it's death from overwork. It is what it means,
Ooh.
and that's not unlike the Americas. We have, hundreds of thousands of deaths of people with stress related work deaths, and that's totally avoidable. So like I don't think that productivity is really about getting more done faster. I think it's about getting the right things done so that and doing those things efficiently so that we can do less. And my goal is to serve the most I can while also working less and living more and truly, I'm not trying to make a living, I'm trying to design a life.
Mm. Yeah, and I really like that your motivation came from not, trying to reach a goal monetarily or, success version. Your version of success was being able to do what you love, but also be with the people that you love. So that motivation came from wanting to create that space and wanting to create that life vision that you have, which is mostly about spending time with your family.
Mm-hmm. And if we want to design the life that we want and and have time for our family and for our health is it's also a very high priority for me. We need to be intentional about how we spend our time and how we spend our energy.
Yeah. So one of the things that I really liked was that you talked about so time blocking and making sure that you're focusing on the essentials, right? Not just all the things, but the important things. So how do you have a system for kind of figuring out which of those things on your to-do list are essential?
Yeah, actually, I have a cheat sheet that I want to give to your audience. It's a 90-day cheat sheet for crafting your well, it's a cheat sheet for crafting your 90-day plan of action.
Mm.
And it kind of follows a model it's pretty simple to remember. So it's the GPS framework. So when it comes to the G, that's first you need to create a game for yourself. Most people would call this a goal. I call it a game because a game has an outcome like a goal does, and it has rules, but it's also meant to be fun.
Mm.
And so first you wanna map out like what's your game, and then you need to create the P, which is the plan. And so you want to map out like if this 90 days I have this outcome I want. I don't know. Let's say it's getting 6 partnerships in the next 90 days. Something specific. And then you want to map out a plan. Like what are the steps that you'll take to achieve that? I break this all down in the cheat sheet. I'm just giving an overview right now. But then the S is the part that I often don't hear about, and I also and myself fell into that trap of creating a goal and a plan and thinking I'm all good, but then not having the S component, which is scheduled time to actually work on your plan.
Mm.
So, like, if I just give you a little example, my wife and I, we love playing music together. I'll just pick up the guitar, start coming up with a riff, and she'll sing, and all of a sudden we have this like awesome song that's just naturally evolving. But since we've had our kids, we haven't been prioritizing that as much, and so we haven't been playing music and connecting in that way that we love. So I thought to myself, okay, I know what I need to do. I'll set a goal as a direction that will focus our energy. So the goal was to create an album, and I made it specific. It'll be 15 songs. And then I knew I needed to, okay, I also need to create a plan, because a goal is it's basically just a dream if you don't have a plan for it. So then I created a plan, broke it down. Okay, we're going to look at all the different song ideas we have, and we're going to find the ones we like the most, and then from there we're going to structure the songs and work on the arrangement and so on, right? So I mapped it out one step after the other. What needed to be done and in what order. But then what happened was nothing. Nothing happened. Life went on, and we continued to, take care of the kids, take care of business, and not work on our music. And that's when I realized that I didn't dedicate time to doing it. So, I had this goal and its plan, but it was destined to fail because there was no space created to actually make it happen.
That makes so much sense, right? It's like you're thinking, okay, we're going to do it, and then nothing.
Yeah, so that's again where time blocking comes in, is without creating space in your life to insert new uh, desires or outcomes, you're going to fall into the whirlwind of life.
Mm.
There's if you want to dive into like the specifics of how we time block, uh, just as like an overview, I'll give you, the first, there's like the skeleton that I map out in terms of health, relationships, and business. Those are my three categories that I insert into my week as I'm planning it. And then I go into the details of like actually planning and inserting what are the essential activities and the meetings and so on. So from a larger high point of view, when it comes to the skeleton, like the main categories of life: health, relationships, and business. And for me, I prioritize life first, because if, my goal of working less and living more, I need to prioritize that. So if I break it down into like specifics of our day, when I'm planning out my kind of ideal day, it starts off with sleep, because to me sleep is such an underrated productivity hack, and foundational element of health. So the mornings are for health, and then the evenings are for family time. So we have our dinner maybe 5:15 until 6, dinner and clean up. And then we have family time for 2 hours basically, 6 till 7, and then 7 till 8 is like getting ready for bedtime, but still family time. And then ideally kids are in bed and hopefully sleeping at 8, and then Tamara and I have time together until it's time for me to fall asleep and get that well-needed rest. So that's kind of like, how I think about it in terms of the life side of things. And then on the work side of things, there's, I establish like what are my, I guess, ground rules. How many hours per day do I want to work? Because the trap that I used to fall in was I just need to get more done, and I don't have, I would work. There was no set end time. There wasn't even really a set beginning time, and I would work, maybe 6 or 7 days a week, but that's unsustainable. And of course, I'm not going to be addressing other very important parts of my life. If I'm not addressing my health and my relationships, like that's actually going to affect my business. I'm not going to perform as well because, if I'm not getting proper sleep and movement, obviously that's going to significantly affect my ability to perform. And then in relationships, if I'm unhappy, that's also going to affect my ability to perform at work. So first thing is, how long am I going to work? When do I start and when do I end? So for me, it's 10 to 5. That's my beginning and end times. And this is a little bit outside of the conversation, but there's some other things too, like where are you going to work? That's focused. So there's some other ground rules in there, but I'm not going to go into that too much, because, I used to work at the kitchen table, and that was creating context confusion where my brain associates spaces to activities. And so if I'm in the kitchen, that's where I eat food, that's where I spend time with my family. And if I'm also working there, I can't mentally and somatically enter the proper state of mind to be truly effective. So now there's one room that's the office, and I all I do in there is I work. I don't confuse any other activities, so that when I'm in there, and this is part of the rituals, which I'm going to get into in a minute, having start and end work rituals that get me into a state of mind. And so walking into the proper space is part of that ritual. So once I know my start and end times, then I schedule in what I call a power up ritual and power down ritual. And these are so valuable for entering a peak state and like a focused state of work. And also, what I used to find was when I was working and I didn't have a power down ritual, I would be working, and then I would end work and I would enter family life, and I would still be thinking about work, and I would be basically still working in my mind when I'm with my family. And there was kind of blurry distinctions between work and family life. And so power up and power down ritual clarifies and creates a distinction and enters me into the proper state of mind so that I can, when I'm at work, I'm fully at work. When I'm with my family, I'm fully with my family. I assign 30 minutes for both of these. I experimented to kind of settle on 30 minutes as like what I needed to do, how the time I needed to accomplish what I wanted to do in those power down and power up rituals. I run my day, my schedule off Google Calendar, and I actually have a separate screen beside me with Google Calendar open at all times, just so that I can see where I am in my day and how much time I have left in my block, when I'm going to take my break, and I can just glance over and see where I am and make sure that I'm still focusing on the right thing that I had assigned to myself. So that's kind of a side point, but that's once my day is fully blocked out, I can reference it. So I have my beginning and end work points. I have my power up and my power down rituals, which is bookending the day with 30-minute chunks. And before I start going into like planning my time, what I manage above my time is my energy. So I want to make sure that in the time that I'm working, I am working at peak efficiency. And the only way I can do that is if I have proper scheduled breaks. So I schedule into every day, and there's two ways I do this. Either I schedule a 30-minute break every 90 minutes. So basically a 90 minutes block of work, then a 30-minute break, maybe for lunch, and then another 90-minute block, and then a 30-minute break for a nap. Sometimes I take a nap, sometimes I just take a break. And then another 90-minute block. So that's one way I do it. And I also sometimes do it where it's a 3-hour block and then a 1-hour break and then a 3-hour block. And that kind of depends on what kind of meetings I have that day and how the day is best gonna be structured. So those are the big blocks, but which you can experiment to find out what's your ideal work length time, and what's your ideal break time. But that's not the only part to it. That's the kind of the macro breaks, but then there's the micro breaks. So within, let's say, a 90-minute or 3-hour block, I also do Pomodoro. So Pomodoro is where you work for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And so that's just enough time for me to get up, go to the washroom, refill my water, and do what I call a micro session. So this is, a tangent. It's outside the scope of the conversation, but basically I break my workup out throughout the day. Instead of doing a workout all at once, I do micro workouts or micro sessions broken up throughout the day. So maybe I'll do six push-ups or pull-ups or squats, depending on what day I am in my workout routine. But it could be anything. If you wanted to just add 2 push-ups after every time you go pee, that's how I started creating these micro sessions. And what that does is it refreshes my energy, and it keeps my energy high so that I don't get that lull halfway through the day. Yeah, so that's I'm that's tying into different concepts. In my perfect productivity program, I go into how to maintain your energy and focus and priority into more depth. But just touching on a little bit of the importance of energy management above time management, because what's the point of having your time blocked out and scheduled if you're drained and you can't focus? Like that's, you know, people say that time is our most important commodity, but time without energy is useless. So that's why I manage my time above my energy.
Yeah, and I think it's important too for people to start to pay attention to when they are most energized and productive. Like I know for me, don't ask me to do anything after about 6 o'clock at night. Like I am not a night owl. That's
Yeah.
not when I'm fully juiced. Like I would rather get up at 5 a.m. and work then than start working at 5 p.m. So like I love what you're saying about energy, and it's like really tapping into what gives you energy and when you're most energized, because that's when you want to put like especially those essential tasks into those energy blocks that are best for you too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's that's one of my next points. Um, but just wanted to like touch on what you were saying about after 6 p.m. You don't ask you to do things. Well, that's also the idea of decision fatigue, which is as our day progresses, we make decisions all throughout the day, and our decision making power, like a battery, gets drained, and we make poor decisions later in the day. If you look at people, like I remember when I used to stay up late and I would play video games and I would eat food that, sometimes junk food or whatever, or people would go to bars and drink a lot of alcohol. And not to judge those things, it's just that for me personally, I found that later in the day, the choices I made were not as in alignment with what I really wanted to accomplish, what I truly wanted for my life. And so to be aware that throughout the day, your decision making power depletes, and especially if you don't rejuvenate it with breaks or maybe sometimes a midday nap, which kind of sounds ridiculous that part of my work day is for a nap, but it really helps me to stay fresh and make sure that my decision making power is at the most it can be.
Yeah, and I like, and I think that really ties into the whole, time blocking and pre-planning is, that you can kind of take those decision fatigue moments or out of it because you've already decided, you've pre-decided that this is what you're going to do. So you don't have to now be, forced to like, but do I feel like doing it? Do I want to do it? That's the emotional side of it is taken out of it, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's a huge component that is so valuable for me when I'm when I sit down to work. Like I don't even know what I'm going to necessarily work on that day because I've already predetermined it the day before. I don't have to think about it. I just sit down, look at my schedule, and get to work. And I don't have to decide what to do. It's already been predetermined. And like you said, yeah, that just conserves a ton of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they say, people like Zuckerberg or whatever, Steve Jobs, they tended to wear the same clothes all the time because they just didn't want to waste their time making that kind of a decision that did not actually impact their day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I do the same thing.
Right? I mean, I would love to have a uniform that I could just put on. I mean, it'd have to be very comfortable, but if I could just put on my uniform every day and not even think about it, I'm a happy girl. Clearly, fashion is not my priority.
Yeah, my wife is like, but what about variety? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you value variety more than I do.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not the one looking at myself either, so it's not that important to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another part to it. She's like, you wear the same thing. Like, I want to see like something different on you.
Ashao, how can people access this cheat sheet that you have and learn more about your courses and the programs that you're offering?
Yeah, so if you go to perfectproductivity.net freeSky.com/Jessica. There'll be an opt-in there where you can enter your name and email, and then you'll be sent the cheat sheet that also goes along with a training that explains more in depth how to use the cheat sheet, and also gives you a broader context of productivity as I see it. And yeah, and also the opportunity, if you're interested, there's going to be the opportunity after that cheat sheet to book a call with me if you want to learn more about how maybe I can help you work with implementing the 9-step framework for becoming highly effective and shaving time off of your work week.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea is to be able to work with somebody to set this up because, it sounds to me like there's a lot of like mindset and a lot of energy, thought, and emotions, and like there's a lot that would go into creating that. And I think having somebody walk you through it would be super beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, I was just digging into the top of the surface of we touched a little bit on energy, but time blocking is really just one of the 9 steps of the full framework. And so yeah, there's so much. I get excited. Sometimes people can get overwhelmed with everything that oh, I need to do all these things. But personally, when I realize, oh, there's all these things I can do, I get excited because how much more, whatever it is, effective I can be, or healthy I can be, or loving and grateful I can be, knowing that there's more things out there that I can really learn and implement. That's the reframe that I take. Instead of overwhelm, I switch to excitement. Not I need to do it all now, but I get to progressively realize these visions.
Yes, I love that. And one of my mentors, Evan Carmichael, I've been involved in his program lately, and he talks about the concept of and instead of or, right? And that's one of the things that I really love is like, yes, I get to do all these things. I can do all these things. It's just a matter of, like you say, it's just prioritizing them and putting them into your life and deciding where they fit. But I can do it all if I want to. I just need to figure out where it all fits, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also acknowledging that there's sometimes seasons for certain aspects of our life that we want to spend more focus on. And like and in business as well, like for the next 90 days, this is going to be our focus. And these other things that I'm interested in can also be addressed, just not right now. And maybe now is not the season for that opportunity or whatever it is that I want to pursue.
Yeah, I agree. I love the 90 days concept because like 3 months, if you just can focus for 3 months, you would be amazed at what you can get done, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so before I let you go, I always have to ask my guests if you could give somebody who's ready to take their business to the next level one piece of advice. Ashao, what would you suggest?
Yeah, so when I gave a lot of different, maybe threw a lot of information out today. But if there's one thing that I would pick out as like something that you can apply is to identify what's your number one, like most essential business activity, and then block out time specifically to work on that. So let's, if you find that, okay, creating content is my number one activity, then I'm going to block that out. And like you said, earlier in the day, maybe your first block of the day will be designated to that activity. And the cheat sheet, I help you break it down 90-day with your 90-day outcome, and then creating what I call a lead measure, which is the activity that leads to what you want to do. So that's my tip is what's something that's actionable, that's essential for your business growth, identifying that, and then blocking that out on your calendar. And starting with that, just starting with what's the one thing and putting that in
Yeah,
as your primary focus.
I love that because everything else will find its way in, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So, by taking that one thing that's most important and making sure that you build time for that is, I think, probably a game changer right there. Because too often, it might even be the thing that we don't enjoy doing, but it's essential. And if we don't build it in, it won't happen. Whereas all the other stuff, it'll happen because we either enjoy it or, yeah, it just, anyways, I love the idea of making sure that you identify that one thing and putting it in there first. So
Yeah, and like
awesome.
you said, it's you might not enjoy it, and it's probably even the scariest thing that you can think of to do in your business. That very well may be your most essential one because that means that you're going to be growing. You're going to be stepping into something new that's uncomfortable.
Yes, absolutely. And that takes us into a whole other subject that we can get into about the whole self-sabotage and all that cool stuff, right? And that's what I love is that, your system for getting things done really does take away, like you say, the decision fatigue, the self-sabotage, all of that, because you're removing it before it can show up, right? So love it.
Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for having me on the show. I really enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. And I'm serious. We're going to do a round two. I feel
Let's do
it.
it. Let's
Yes,
do it.
do it. Awesome. Thanks so much, Ashao.